Did we have any regrets from area B or D?
Hello, everyone.
Mike?
There was a director that couldn't make it when the initial doodle poll was done.
Oh, right. That might have been Tony. Okay, we'll give one more minute, but then we'll get started. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. Good afternoon, Director Rainbow. I will call this meeting to order. And I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded lands of First Nations and Indigenous peoples across the country. We all live, work, and play on the ancestral lands of the First Peoples. We are honored to be guests in these lands. And with that, I will call for an approval of the agenda, moved by Director Weeb, seconded by Director Demare. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and now we are on 3.1, which is a request for decision on the resolution required to pursuant to Ministerial Order 192. Could I have someone move that? Moved by Director Richmond, seconded by Director Weeb. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we're now on regional moment, and I believe Director Elliott is going to do the District of Squamish regional moment.
Thanks, Director Forge. I had a little video I was going to play to kick things off. Am I supposed to play that video, or was someone else going to play the video? I sent it to Natalie.
I think Pip is going to run that.
Oh, there.
Apologies, Chair. I just I popped in after the speaking, so just one moment, and I'll share that screen for you.
Thanks, Philippa.
No problem. Please, if you have any problems with the sound, if I can ask for a bit of a wave.
Tanoia, Kayachtan ta Squamish o Chomeo.
Our story begins with the Squamish and Coast Salish peoples, guardians and knowledge keepers of these waters and lands. Perched on the edge of Vancouver, Canada, this majestic fjord is teeming with biodiversity, from mountaintop to ocean bed. Once devastated by industrialization, the region has undergone a dramatic but fragile ecological turnaround. After decades, life is finally resurfacing. Life between the mountains and sea is rich. This region provides a place for learning, a place for connection with self, with nature, and with community. A place to grow and develop sustainably. A place of pride for those who live here. A place of optimism and hope. Our vision is a region where biodiversity is protected and humanity thrives. People pulling together, sharing their passion for this treasured area. and co-creating the future of Atkatsumhow Sound. A future where people and commerce can exist in harmony with nature. Join the conversation as we collaboratively address issues for our region, based on a collective vision of place.
Thank you, Philippa. So my regional moment really is to focus on the designation of Atkatsumhow Sound as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. This happened in the midst of the federal election, so it didn't get maybe the press it deserved. We were also all engaged at UBCM at the time. But Atkatsumhow Sound is the hard work of a lot of volunteers over the last 5 years. And it really stemmed from the reality that the Howe Sound region is beautiful and fragile, and yet no one jurisdiction holds governance over that area, aside from First Nations people. But there's multiple municipalities, there's provincial forest tenure, there's Crown land, then there's federal jurisdiction over the waters. And so volunteers throughout Howe Sound recognize that one of the ways to try and pull these conversations together was through pursuing the UNESCO Biosphere Region designation. And so that happened on the 15th of September. We were able to have a small celebration. Some of us were able to get together on the Saturday before the election and really celebrate this achievement. And it is a really big achievement. We're the 19th one in Canada. In BC, the Clayoquot Biosphere region has been designated, and Aerosmith over outside in Nanaimo. And those folks played a huge role in influencing the development of our application. This was really led by Ruth Simons, who lives in Lions Bay, and a team of volunteers. She now co-chairs the Howe Sound Biosphere Initiative with Joyce Williams, who was just reelected again to Squamish Nation Council. And so at the core of it was really centering Squamish Nation, First Nations people in this conversation. And while it doesn't have any authority, it cannot implement rules or requirements. What it does is become a really beautiful place for convening conversation. And so a nonprofit body will collaborate with industry, with government, with First Nation, with civil society to help further these goals around the UN sustainability goals of making sure that humanity and economy can thrive together. And I think there are communities throughout the Howe Sound region, and certainly our regional district, that are trying to rewrite that relationship, both with First Nations people, but also with our natural environment, and trying to find different ways to have the conversation so that we're not creating an us-them type of scenario or a win-lose type of scenario, but that trying to find the things that can coexist and help us achieve a lot of those mutually beneficial goals. So biodiversity is very much at the heart of this, but so is culture and learning, and also making sure that we can support and, where needed, improve people's quality of life so that we can all coexist in this region more sustainably. What's really interesting to me is that the Biosphere Region Initiative has already signed an MOU with Capilano University, and I've identified research projects that can be ongoing in Howe Sound. So what this becomes is then a living laboratory. And I'm hopeful that more universities, including Quest University, will see the benefit of engaging with us and doing research in this region so that we can be learning while we have these conversations about cumulative impacts and reconciliation and protecting biodiversity, especially in a changing climate. So to me, it was really exciting. I was so sad that it didn't get the profile it truly deserves, but it hasn't diminished the spirit of the folks that have been involved in it and the sense of celebration. The first step now is to create the first 5-year management plan. And So this will be done in consultation with all of the stakeholders around the Sound about, if our goals are to achieve this ideal of living in harmony with the natural environment, what do we need to work on in the first 5 years? So what happens is that these biosphere regions work in 5-year plans, and every 10 years they're reassessed by UNESCO to make sure that they're on track and to maintain their designation. So I know we'll hear more about it for those of us attending the Howe Sound Forum in October. But I hope that people will follow this organization and follow what they're doing, because I think we all will benefit greatly from the work that's happening around Howe Sound. So that's what I wanted to focus on today. And I'll turn it back to the chair, and happy to take any questions, although I'm probably not the best person to ask, and we should probably have the group present if people are interested in learning more. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. It is very, very exciting. And I agree with you. It would be nice for us to share this message through our social media, just to share that this wonderful designation has been achieved, because we've been big supporters of this initiative since my time in local government. And so we can certainly continue to spread the good word, because there's a lot of amazing people to draw from, and it would be great to have them come and present to a committee of the whole if they want to at a future meeting. So we'll track that down. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Tony. Director Rainbow, go ahead. You're muted, Tony.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Not so much a comment, just to support everything that Karen had to say there, and just to sort of highlight for us the fact that as a regional district, we have quite a large footprint around the Sound. From the northern border of Lions Bay to Squamish on the east side, and then from Squamish down to Sunshine Coast Regional District on the west side. So we have a lot of physical contact with the Sound. And when you think about the kinds of developments that are planned within the southern part of Area D, it'd be something for us to think carefully about as we move forward. And I'm not sure whether Karen wanted this to come up right now, but I'm going to mention it anyway. At some point, we as a regional district will need to think about providing some sort of financial support to the organization. It's not a simple thing, it'd be a bit tricky, but just to let you know that at some time we will be getting a request or a suggestion that we do something about creating a service center of some kind that will provide money to support the initiatives.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nope, seeing none. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Director Rainbow.
I just wonder, Karen mentioned that there was a celebration on the Saturday, and it was very clear from the people gathered there how much they think of Ruth Simon and the work that she put into this. There are a lot of people, a lot of volunteers involved, undoubtedly, there certainly were, but I don't think it would have gone as smoothly as it did without Ruth's work. And I would like to propose that as a board, we send a letter to Ruth congratulating her on this achievement.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is that the board write a letter of recognition and thanks to Ruth Simons and her team for the tremendous work that they have put forward on behalf of our region. Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any further discussion on that? Is there enough for you to work with there, Director Clark? Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. We do have 6 minutes until our 1:20 delegation is supposed to start. I think for the sake of introductions and bringing him in, let's bring him in and we'll start the process. Anyone that was wanting to watch this and is tuning in specifically at 1:20, I'm sure they won't miss anything. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. We have Director LaFrance, our Director of Finance, here for the presentation, but I'd like to, and so welcome. And I'd also like to welcome Mr. Robert Fisher on behalf of the BC Social Procurement Initiative. Do I have that right? I think, yes. Yes. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here today. We are a little bit ahead of time, but that's how we like to roll. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Fisher, to introduce yourself and take it away. We are looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks so much, and good afternoon, Chair Ford and Board Directors. Great pleasure to be with you to present on the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative today. I'm joining you from the Lekwungen territories here in Victoria. I'm the project coordinator for the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative and want to kind of showcase the membership opportunity here and talk a little bit about opportunities behind social procurement. I do want to first recognise that Director Elliott is co-chair of BCSPI and also Mayor of BCSPI member community, the District of Squamish. And so I'd like to just quickly invite Director Elliott to provide some opening remarks before I begin with the main presentation.
Thanks, Robert. So yes, I'm wearing a couple of hats today, but earlier this year, I was appointed as co-chair of the BC SPI. So Squamish became the first municipality outside of the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities to become a member of BC SPI. And under phase 2 of the funding agreement that we received from the province, which was $500,000 to take this initiative province-wide, part of the terms of reference said that one of the co-chairs had to be from the mainland, which was me. So, but, you know, I've been very passionate about the role of procurement in achieving social and environmental values for quite some time. And I think my thinking really shifted into high gear after my trip to Oslo in the fall of 2019. And I had an opportunity to sit down with some of the folks that had been working with the city of Oslo to really understand how they were working with their vendors for the dollars that they're spending anyway, about how to achieve more social and environmental value from the dollars that they're already spending as a government. And so, you know, that piqued my interest. I came back to BC. We have a manager of procurement at the district. That's a fairly new role since 2019. And that started my journey to sort of start bothering the co-chairs at the time of the BCSPI to allow membership. So I will turn it over to Rob, but I just want people to realize that we have members large and small. So right now, the largest member would be City of Victoria, but we have some very small communities that are involved. Some of them do not have procurement staff. One of the great things about being part of BCSPI is that you get access to training, to templates, to all these amazing things so that it can be rolled in without you needing to scale up. And so I think that's part of the magic of it. And now that, you know, all these early communities did the hard work with Rob and his crew early on, the communities that are joining now get to benefit from all these amazing resources that currently exist. So I'm really excited to turn it over to you, Rob.
Thanks very much, Mayor Elliott. Just want to check that you can all see the presentation and we're on the title slide.
Yep.
And we just want to advance to the next slide, please. So during this short presentation, we'll open up with some information about the what, why, and what's possible with social procurement, and then we'll look at how these new best practices can be implemented at government level. And we'll talk about what BCSPI is and how becoming a member can support that implementation. Next slide, please. So what is social procurement? Well, simply put, social procurement practices can leverage additional social value from existing purchasing. Move to the next slide, please. And when we look at the evolution of procurement, we can see that it was only in the 60s that we started to include green considerations in our procurement practices. And now, just as recently as 2018, social considerations are starting to emerge in the procurement process, considering the social impact of our purchasing. Move to the next slide, please. So when we add that additional social consideration into our existing purchasing, we're creating not only the usual purchaser and supplier value, we're also creating additional benefits for our community. Next slide, please. So why are more governments and purchasers starting to look at social procurement? Well, every purchase we make has an economic, environmental, and social impact. And so when we focus on best value for money, procurement is much more than a financial transaction alone. And when we mobilize our existing spending to include that social value consideration, procurement becomes a tool for building healthy communities. Next slide, please. And the key opportunity areas when we look at social procurement are employment opportunities, skills, training and apprenticeship opportunities, social value or diversity in the supply chain, and broader community economic development opportunities. Next slide, please. Social procurement objectives can be connected directly to the needs of the community and government's social and strategic planning goals. For example, community economic development goals in a government strategic plan can be addressed by adding related social value considerations into the purchasing process. I know one of the SLRD's strategic goals is a regional cooperation and coordination. And under this, you're developing a procurement sharing framework for the region. We believe that including social procurement in this process would ensure that additional social value can be realized from this regional approach. Next slide, please. And because social procurement can generate local economic activity, local employment opportunities, and local impact, it's now being adopted by more and more governments and organizations as a key tool in their COVID-19 recovery toolbox. Next slide, please. One of the big questions that we wanted, or myths that we like to dispel when it comes up around social procurement, the question always comes up, is it legal? What about the trade agreements? Well, yes, it is legal, but trade agreements do, of course, still apply. And the key thing to know here is that you cannot restrict competition, but you can require social value outcomes from all bidders by including that social value consideration in the purchasing process. Notably, trade agreements also have exceptions for working with non-profits and other community organizations. Next slide, please. And when we think about government spending, there are two main avenues for social procurement implementation. One is through the social purchasing of goods and services. This is the purchasing of all the items that you currently buy for your operations, and community services, things like office supplies, catering, printing, events collateral, janitorial services, and building maintenance services. And the other is through major infrastructure or construction projects, where you can explore predetermined community benefits or include community employment benefits. And larger projects like this yield many opportunities for social procurement, from the design stage through the actual build and then ongoing maintenance and servicing. Next slide, please. And some of the social procurement key implementation options for local governments are listed here. We look at under threshold and direct award purchasing. And this is discretionary buying, often dictated by your policy at a certain monetary level or trade agreement level, where going out to tender isn't required. And this includes things purchased on corporate credit cards and other items that fall below those purchasing thresholds. If the cost and definition of the procurement require you to go out to tender, this is when you can include social value criteria into the bidding process by weighting it and evaluating it along with the other purchasing criteria that you normally see, like cost, quality, experience, and environmental considerations. We talked about the opportunities for larger projects. Here you can look at things like unbundling or contracting with local suppliers as well. And exploring contractors' supply chains is another key opportunity. There are ways to include social procurement in purchasing where it might not otherwise be obvious. For example, contracting a design firm for the planning stage of a project, or a consultant to carry out more clerical-based work. Here you can actually explore potential bidders' existing supply chains. For example, where do they buy their catering, their cleaning supplies, and their office supplies? And social procurement can be included in government purchasing policy. And this allows community social value outcomes to be defined and considered in the procurement process. Next slide, please. So we've looked at some of the opportunities around social procurement, but let's talk about how BCSPI is helping governments and other anchor purchasers across the province to implement these new practices. BCSPI is a collaborative initiative on a mission to improve the health of our communities and the strength of our economies by changing the culture of public sector procurement. And we do this by providing local governments with a shared and collaborative learning network that offers training, coaching, and a wide array of resources to support their social procurement journey. The beauty of the initiative is it's run by local governments for local governments, and is governed by a steering committee made up of political and senior leads from each member community. The steering committee meets quarterly to report on successes and challenges and drives the direction, decides on next steps taken, and chooses what new resources are developed for members. I should note there that we need to update that co-chair portion to Mayor Elliott. Next slide, please. And BCSPI started as a concept back in 2016 when a group of local governments on Vancouver Island wanted to explore the creation of a shared social procurement learning hub in the region. And in 2018, that working group received funding from the Island Coastal Economic Trust and the City of Victoria. And the initiative was launched with 9 initial members in 2019. And through 2019 to 2021, BCSPI grew in size with over 20 additional members joining. And in June of this year, the BC government recognised social procurement and BCSPI as a key economic recovery opportunity and provided funding for province-wide expansion. Next slide, please. And BCSPI membership is made up of a range of community types and sizes, from medium-sized cities to small rural communities, and the membership currently includes 6 regional districts. So you can see a representation of some of the existing members. Next slide, please. In those first 2 years, from 2019 to 2021, the project trained over 150 member staff in social procurement practices and concepts. We realised over $200 million in spending with an added social value lens, and helped steward over 50 social procurement pilot projects within BCSPI member communities. Next slide, please. And BCSPI services are delivered by a team of social procurement, industry engagement and community impact experts, with Bisocial Canada and Presentations Plus developing resources, coaching and training. Scale Collaborative provides project management and coordination, and the Vancouver Island Construction Association leads engagement and liaison with the construction sector. Next slide, please. What we can see here is the BCSPI member journey, which guides the community's progress from understanding the basic concepts of social procurement to full implementation and impact measurement. And as we follow the steps from 1 through 12, we can see how members move from onboarding to planning their journey, where they identify their social procurement outcomes, through to training, then into pilot projects. And this is where the BCSPI team provides coaching throughout the whole process. And then you can see there at number 9, policy implementation. And when the member is in the full implementation phase, moving around the final circle in the visual here, this is where social procurement is going into purchasing. Social value vendors in the community are building their capacity to respond and deliver on government contracts. And social value outcomes that were decided upon at step 2 are being measured and reported on. And we see members remaining in the initiative for 2 to 3 years maximum as they work through this process. And importantly, BCSPI recognises governments have limited resources. And so some members are able to move more quickly through this process, where others need to take time and an approach that works best for them. And the long-term goal is always for a member to take the learning forward into implementation to a point where they no longer require the support of BCSPI and can continue to mobilise their spend to create additional community benefits for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. And members get access to a whole host of resources, as we said, which support that member journey we looked at. And these include best practice templates, guides, and a full online resource library, for example, RFPs and social procurement work from other members. They receive dedicated coaching support, and this links into a thriving community of practice where lessons learned, challenges and outcomes are shared, and supplier outreach, impact measurement and communications tools. Next slide, please. Coaching and consulting support, as we mentioned, is available from the BCSPI team of social procurement experts and includes one-to-one coaching for member staff, initial project reviews, support on social procurement criteria with language and weighting, and policy development assistance. Next slide, please. And BCSPI works on both the buyer and supplier side to help members identify and connect with social value suppliers and vendors in their communities, helping local social value suppliers to recognise the opportunity to do business with government, but also to understand how to respond and deliver on government contracts. Next slide, please. And we take a regional approach to impact measurement, and we partner with Royal Roads University to develop a region-wide impact measurement framework and accompanying guide to support members in their measurement activities. The regional framework is aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. And finally, joining BCSPI is easy, affordable, impactful for your community. Our fee structure is population-based, meaning that all the resources, training and support we've just discussed is available for an annual membership fee, the equivalent of which a government would pay to its local area of government association. Our unique collaborative regional model ensures that communities are able to work together and share learning, successes, challenges and opportunities in order to advance social procurement effectively. And of course, as we mentioned, most importantly, social procurement can directly support member communities' strategic goals and social planning needs. Next slide, please. And that brings us to the end of the presentation, but I'd like to again invite Mayor Elliott to add anything from the perspective of both BCSPI co-chair, but also as mayor of one of our member communities, and we can open it up for questions.
Thanks, Rob. I won't add anything at this point, but hope that people have questions for us.
Great. Thank you very much. Director Birch-Jones, go ahead.
Thank you. To me, this is clearly something that we should already be doing and living, and certainly every single consumer choice you make is a political decision. And I'm really conscious of that. I paid a lot for a steak that I had last night because I know where the cow was raised and the people that worked on it and all of that. I'm with you. And it's nice to be able to afford to make these choices. I think the SLRD is doing this to a certain extent already, just from what I've seen in the way office lunches and so on are arranged. I know that's very small, but I'm completely in favor of us jumping on with this, signing on and supporting. And I really thank you for your presentation. And I'm glad Mary Elliott is a leader here.
Thank you. Director Richmond, go ahead.
Thanks, Robert, for the presentation, and Karen for bringing it here. I'm just interested how some of the experience from smaller communities. I know you both mentioned a couple of times that smaller communities sign on. I think coming from a smaller community, I have a lot of questions in terms of how it would work with our small buying power, but the other question for you, as a small community with limited capacity, what does it look like from a staff perspective if we were to sign on this sort of thing? How much of a work commitment am I throwing onto my staff's desk by going down this road? Because I'm very much supportive of it, and we do have a lot of these components, pardon me, in our tender process, but certainly not to the extent that you folks are working on. So what does it look like for staff?
Thanks, Director Rickman. And, I'll answer both points in your question. For small communities, firstly, it's incredibly good value, and often small communities don't necessarily have the in-house resources, as you're alluding to there, to do a lot of this stuff. And that's where this initiative really comes in, with the heavy lifting, with the existing resources, with the coaching, and also the shared learning that they get from the community of practice, and shared examples of similar communities of similar sizes with similar kind of staffing resources and purchasing needs. As far as resources on staff go, as I mentioned, there would be a political lead assigned to meet quarterly with the steering committee. And normally then there's a lead assigned, and that lead would kind of take forward social procurement in the organisation. And as I said, in that member journey, we take into consideration where members are at. It's designed in a way that when we check in, we talk about what is the capacity, what are the constraints, what are the unique kind of challenges you face, and the unique kind of purchasing that you're doing compared to other members. And then we look at saying, okay, where do we start? What's the capacity for training? What's the capacity for starting to pilot for some things? And we want to move through comfortably with those smaller communities, or any community member really. So that's what we aim to do. And as I said, BCSPI really provides that heavy lifting support with the consulting and the coaching and all of those resources and templates and best practices.
I might just add, Director Richmond, that some communities jump in with a policy change first. So we certainly did. Other communities decide to pilot and start incorporating language into some of their smaller purchases, or sort of a more buy local approach. So they do some of the hands-on work first before they get around to creating the capacity to write policy. So that first piece of onboarding and sort of planning your journey, that's really key, and where I think small communities benefit from the coaching that BCSPI provides, because you can scale it to the speed and size of your community, like what is doable, rather than you must do these things. What we're trying to do is just move people along that continuum in a positive way that doesn't burn them out, but sort of starts to build momentum.
Director Demare, go ahead.
Yeah, this is for Robert. I'm from an electoral area. So if the SLRD electoral areas come on board, how is it going to relate to, currently we're working on asset management and some of the principles of it. How do they correlate with asset management and purchasing with the program that we're looking at here?
I think initially looking at purchasing primarily, you may see, if you put this in policy, that it moves across areas, but we don't necessarily look at the asset management piece of it. However, we can potentially coach and consult on some of that if it's relevant to your journey, through that kind of member continuum.
Good.
I might just add to Director Demare that there are ways to also think about the monies that electoral area directors grant, and they may wish to start to include language around a social benefit or local employment or opportunities for youth. All that sort of thing, I think, can start to be designed into the way that we make decisions as a board, but also at the electoral area level. And then I think, Robert spoke to these thresholds that exist, and you can sole source some opportunities to nonprofits or to local businesses. And so I think that can be a benefit where the SLRD is building infrastructure or requiring a service in an area. One of the examples in Squamish is that we wanted to use some of our BC Restart funds to build covered structures in our community. And so we put right in the RFP that the district is accepting offers for supply and installation of covered structures from local contractors. And we were able to put that in because it was below a treaty threshold. So we could specifically say we only wanted locals bidding on that. And we're starting to award on some RFPs 10 points for local employment. So I think there's different ways that electoral areas can look at this.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go to Director Rainbow. Go ahead. Tony, you're muted.
I had a similar question to Sal. I'm interested in Director Elliott's response. I'm actually perfectly willing and happy to look at any money that we are granting, and sometimes it's a considerable amount of money, and to put some sort of conditions in place, whether that money is going to a local community or whether it's going to a nonprofit or wherever it's going. So what I would appreciate is if, as a regional district, we develop some kind of guidelines that individual directors can access when we're discussing these kinds of things. What will happen is I'll often get a call from an organization asking or saying that they want to apply for a grant of X thousand dollars. If I had some sort of reference I could go to there and in those initial stages say to them, yeah, I would consider that. I would consider taking that forward. Here are the things that you need to include in your application. So I just need some guidance in that. And so my question is, how can we provide that guidance? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Fisher can probably speak to the coaching element of this process and how that can create kind of a framework for the electoral area directors to work within when they have that sort of question. And there's probably other questions we haven't considered, but is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at, and I said, with the member kind of journey at the check-in point where we look at what you're trying to do with social procurement, that's when we get the opportunity to talk about all the things you might want to consider. And then if you're looking at policy, and things like that, then those kind of things can be created with an accompanying guideline. So that's certainly something we've done in other places. And that's really the beauty of social procurement is, as I said, it can be customized towards your existing strategic goals when you're picking your objectives. So if you're looking at local employment, if you're looking at, keeping jobs and talent in communities and things like that, you can craft your policy that way, you can craft the language that way. And also, as Mayor Elliott mentioned, working within those trade agreement thresholds really actually allows a lot of flexibility, to contract with local organisations, and then even higher up with non-profits and social enterprises.
Excellent. Okay, are there any final, Director Pettengill, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say, I think it's because we're a member as a municipality, but I've been able to attend some of the trainings and I found them incredibly useful and helpful to understand how it all works. And I'm really excited about the whole thing. Just a couple of the comments, especially from Dr. Rainbow, though, made me aware of something that I'm not quite certain of. And my sense was that in terms of policies that you start to develop, the sense I have is there's a little less about you must meet this, that, and the other criteria or you're out. It's more about you will get more points and we will look more favorably on your application if you meet these things. And so it doesn't cut out people as much as it really incentivizes people to work towards improving on all these things. And that the sense I had was that was more the direction.
That's absolutely correct. Yes. The idea is that you're simply asking an additional question that you will award points against if folks respond, but you're still making the procurement happen. So it doesn't exclude anybody. And that's very important, particularly when it comes to trade agreements. But what you're saying is, and oftentimes people will need to come from outside your community to do work, but then there's an opportunity to say, okay, but what else can you do as part of this that will be of a benefit to our community, given that we've identified these things as priorities for us. And also with those kind of opportunities come ways that you can utilize local contractors as well. You can ask for folks, the prime contractor to subcontract, and lots of different opportunities there as well.
Director Rainbow, did you have a follow-up?
Well, yeah, I'm interested that directors from or councillors from Squamish have already been able to access some training in this area. So, and I look at the regional district, and if Whistler and Pemberton and Lillooet decided that they wanted to join in the way that Squamish has done, that would all be available to them. So therefore, where I go from there is to cover the electoral areas. Can we apply as a regional district to be a member? And if so, how would we just take the number of people that live in the electoral areas when calculating the fee? And if that's what we're going to do, at some point I'd like to make a motion that we apply as a regional district so that the electoral areas can take advantage of
it. The fees are based on what you pay to your area association. So the SLRD is it part of 2? Are some of the electoral area directors part of Thompson Nicola regions?
SILGA.
Through SILGA.
So
yeah, so Rob, it's a little bit confusing for us because we've got some area directors that sit in a different area association. But basically, if we took the LMLGA, it's the fees that you pay to LMLGA are your membership fee in BCSPI. And if the board is going to have a resolution, I should recuse myself. So I would say keep that in mind, Chair, if it gets that far, since I'm the co-chair. So
I would say that I would consider a motion to send this to staff to come back with a report on how this fits. And then bring back a recommendation at a future meeting. Does that work for you, CAO? Or Director Rainbow, does that work for you?
Yeah, I'll move that. That's a good way forward.
Seconded by Director Birch Jones.
Can I
Is there
still
any
recuse
further-
myself?
Okay. Shall we?
It's very hard to wear two hats, and I'm very
Yeah.
much wearing my co-chair hat here. So
Do you want to be in the waiting room for this
can you
decision?
just send me out for the vote? Because I would prefer
Yeah.
not to vote on this.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks, Rob.
Chair, if Director Elliott could state on the record the reason for her conflict.
I'm going to recuse myself from this vote just because of a perceived apprehension of bias because I co-chair the BC SPI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll put you in the waiting room for a very lengthy time. Thank you. Okay, so the motion on the floor is that we direct staff to go away and come back with a report at a future meeting regarding this initiative and whether or not we would like to participate. And we had it moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Is there anyone? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, if you could just move and second that again, please, with Director Elliott out of the room. Thanks.
So moved by Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Birch Jones. And I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we'll bring Director Elliott back in. Oh, we just lost someone. Welcome back, Director Elliott. Mr. Fisher, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and present this. And thank you for the work you've done for municipalities through the province. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Chair Ford, and to all the directors for your time and for letting me present. And if staff would like to reach out to discuss this further with me, please do put them in touch. Always happy to, have those discussions and talk further.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Good job, mate. Good job.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We will move along now to 6.1, which is the CAO verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing today.
Okay. Thank you. 7.1 Chair's verbal. I'm just going to repeat what Director Elliott had already mentioned. The Howe Sound Community Forum was announced on, I think it was Friday, October 24th. I strongly recommend that anyone interested consider attending. It will be in Bowen Island, and I think it'll be a lovely way to celebrate the biosphere as well as all of the other work that the Howe Sound Community Forum does. It's always an excellent networking event for us to work with our neighbors and understand what everyone is working on. So strongly recommend that you sign up for that. And my other report back, which I'm very excited about, we sit on a regular meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health. 92% of Vancouver Coastal Health of eligible community members have been given their first dose of vaccination, and 85% have received their second dose. So that is tremendous, and I'm grateful, and we'll keep it up. And there's another vaccine clinic coming October 13th to Squamish, and I believe Whistler as well. So there is more opportunities to get your vaccine if you haven't already done so. And that, I will end the chair's verbal report. Could I have someone move receipt of those two reports? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Birch Jones. Any questions or comments? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Is there any late business? No, I don't think so. Okay, could I have someone move that we close this meeting to the public? Moved by Director Elliott, seconded by Director Demare. Is there anyone opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to give a 10-minute